sustainability. Is it good for people, planet, and profits? So stick around. We will be right back.
Cool. Cool. I'll share it later.
Thanks everyone for joining. This is going out to people on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, Periscope, and Twitch. So if you want to join in the conversation, please do write us a comment and question, and we will add you in. Thanks for joining this new idea, Hikosaemon. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks to everybody who is watching and will watch. This is I'm kind of excited about this. This is something I like to talk about, but it's nice to do it in a focused way like this, and I had a really fun time talking with you last time. So great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I think you, if I'm not mistaken, you were episode number 87, and now you're 107.
Wow.
So
and even like I
that's
just
pretty
watched
cool.
I think yesterday or day before yesterday, I watched 100. But that was like 2 days ago. Granted, I was watching a recording, but your rate of output is amazing, and you've got there are still so many shows that I want to go back and watch that I just haven't had time to see. But yeah, congratulations on the big 100.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you very much. It was crazy, being interviewed about it and being on the other side and seeing how it is being interviewed gave me a lot of respect for people that I interview. So lots more empathy now.
Don't be apathetic, and two, no. It's far more work. As you were talking about in the interview about the preparation and so on that you do. And to tell you the truth, one thing I noticed watching some other podcasts and video podcasts like this after being on your thing, it really stood out a lot more to me watching conversations with people who clearly hadn't prepared for the interviews compared to you.
Oh,
So
wow. Thanks.
it makes you
I
stand out in a
appreciate
really
that.
positive way.
That's awesome. Because I do make effort. I don't know how much prep I did today because you are the news master. So I am relying on you to know a lot about these stories that we've chosen together. So it should be really interesting. Really
There's
looking
lots of
forward
cool
to it.
things to talk about. I wouldn't profess to be the master of anything, but
Well, how
I do
many
like to talk
years?
about what we
How
have.
many years have you been doing that? You said 10 years for the weekly news show, right? Tokyo Tonight?
Geez, I'd have to have a look. For many years, I kind of did this. In YouTube, I did a show called 2.5 Voyages with a guy called Victor, and we would always just get guests on. Generally, those would be interview type things, but when we were together, we would talk about general sort of topics. But I wanted to focus on news and do that myself, so I guess that probably started after that. But yeah, not quite 10, but a good number of years, probably more than 5 anyway.
That's great. And you've been able to do it consistently every week?
Well, I mean, sometimes I'll have to be on a vacation or not well, but I would say out of the 52 weeks in the year, I probably manage a solid 47, 48.
Wow, that's impressive. I just read a story, not Japan related, but a teacher was stuck in an elevator with his 2 kids, and he was doing an online lesson from his phone. And I thought, wow, that I'm humbled by that. Like I'm in front of a computer screen. I've got everything laid out. So I think people are really rising to the challenge of working from home right now, right?
Our concept of luxury, I guess, is constantly being adjusted, isn't it? From being in a big office to being at home to being stuck in an elevator. Hopefully that's as far as it goes.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate all the news stories that you introduce to a wider audience through YouTube every week. So we're going to attempt that. We're going to talk about the story and then talk about it a little bit in terms of how that affects our community and environment and the future for Japan. So where do you want to start? We've got lots of good stories.
Yeah. So And to tell you the truth, this is first time, and I just rocked into this. So I did go and save a whole bunch of links earlier, which I could flip right through right now in my regular Flipboard. And by the way, I think I'll share the link to the Flipboard, so if people are interested in any of the articles we're talking about, they can go find the Flipboard, which has all the links. And I've actually created a separate magazine to my personal weekly show. So, assuming we'll do this again going forward, we'll keep doing this. All the links that we just talk about will be in one place.
That sounds
Um,
great. Should we
but
start with the Caesarea, the top
Caesarea.
ranking? Is it Caesarea?
Well, the hot topic.
Caesarea.
I don't know if it's top. I don't know how you describe it, but it's kind of funny. Again, through all the RSS, through all the blogs that I just sort of keep up with and follow, I saw something that was, you know what? And that was from Nippon.com, which is run by Peter Durfee, which actually does normally quite sort of serious like economics and politics and stuff. But there was this thing, somebody had done some sort of survey of
Through
foreigners living in
YOLO.
Japan and what their favorite restaurants were.
I think the data originally came from YOLO.
Ah, right,
Yeah.
right. And they picked that up as a subject, and it was kind of funny. And when I saw this list, it had Caesarea as the most popular restaurant in Japan for foreigners, and then the list that came under it had like Gusto, and it had a list of places that I barely consider. I mean, we're spoiled obviously in Japan. Caesarea actually is pretty good. There were some places on there that are affordable but pretty good, but as it went down, it was like, really, like, what are foreigners doing? And everyone first reacted with the same way as I did with Disgust, and then everybody started sharing their favorite ones. And within that, I got the most tweets I've had in probably years in the last couple of days, just around this one
Wow.
blog. But within it, there were some really, really interesting discussions, particularly from the perspective of people with dietary needs and restrictions. Like Rochelle Kopp was talking about the challenges finding places where she can eat gluten-free.
Yeah.
I've had friends come to Japan who need halal, or they need kosher food or whatever,
Or
as well
vegan,
as
vegetarian.
as well as the quintessential impossible one, vegan, vegetarian,
Yeah.
and all the permutations thereof.
So just to give people an idea, the top restaurants in that YOLO list,
Yeah.
Caesarea was number one. And Caesarea is like mega, mega cheap. Like when I think we went there once as a family, I think it was seriously like 1,000 yen and everybody had eaten something. I don't know exactly
A four-person
how.
family would be full for like less than $20, which is ridiculous.
It's just incredibly cheap that it makes you worry a little bit.
Yeah, but so I've worked. My first job in Japan was like way out in the countryside, and it was 20 minutes walk from the station to the factory that I was at, through rice fields, and the only restaurant anywhere near the place, if you couldn't handle the silicon wafer factory cafeteria anymore, the only place was the Caesarea. But it was good. I mean, it wasn't just that, we were starved for anything, but pretty much anything on that menu. I mean, every item is like 300 yen or 400 yen, but it's all pretty decent. So
well, I mean, it didn't seem too bad. We are a vegetarian family, so we were quite limited in terms of what we could eat. We ended up with a lot of popular bar snacks, French fries, plain salad, that kind of thing.
But even that stuff, like they do good garlic bread, they do. I'm sorry. So this is where it's fun. I enjoy going out with my vegetarian friends and my dietary restricted friends, just because it's such a challenge. I just find it interesting to learn what the rules are and try to help them figure out. And the thing that kills me is, like, when you ask people in Japan, they don't think about, if it tastes good, they don't think about any sort of ethical or the only way you can get people to take you seriously is if you say you're allergic. That's the only time they'll actually go back to the kitchen and check. If you ask, hey, does this have pork in it, or does this have meat, or does this have animal products in it? If you say animal products, like, for me, it's one of these things in Japan, as a non-vegetarian, I can go out regularly and have a great meal that will not have any visible, identifiable protein in it, for example. You go out and have, or, like meat protein. You can have all great fresh organic vegetables and tofu and stuff as a meal, and it's great. But if you're a vegetarian, though, you've still got the problem that all the sauces and the dashi and everything that make it all magical.
For many years, we knew we were just eating less meat as vegetarians. And years ago, it's been much, much better in the last 10 years. And I talked to Nadia McKechnie from Tokyo Vegan about this. For me, as a vegetarian vegan, it's been so much better in the last 10 years. At least people get it now.
Yeah.
10 years ago, I would order something and say, no meat, please. They would understand. They would come back. It'd have loads of bacon inside. And you'd be like, I thought I asked with no
Yeah.
bacon. Like, I can't eat this. And then they would say sometimes, I cut it up really small so that you wouldn't be bothered by it. And I was like, what?
Yeah. I had a Jewish friend, and I remember taking him to a big sort of restaurant thing, and is there any pork in the salad? And they said no, and it clearly had bacon sprinkles all over it. And my friend's looking at it, and he's saying, "Dude, is that pork?" And I'm like, "It could be corned beef."
Oh man.
But
Yeah. Well, for some reason, ham and bacon for years was not considered meat when you would say no meat, please, in the dish. It was some kind of, it was like parsley. You just put it on top as a kind of extra,
yeah.
you know.
It just doesn't
Anyway,
compute. Just
yeah.
the concept of avoiding it doesn't compute with people, and and that's the thing. It's kind of weird because it's not like Japanese are like a huge meat-eating culture per se. It's just they don't have any concept of excluding ingredients from things, and they can't compute that, which is why it's been really
quite
interesting
often,
to see.
Yeah, quite
the
often
development.
we would be told it will have no taste if you order it like that. We're like, no,
Yeah.
no, we're good with that. No, it's fine, really, honestly. Yeah.
So,
Should we list the rest of the list? So
so what?
Yeah. Go ahead.
What May told me. Oh, you're right. We should go through the list.
So number 2 was beef bowl, sukiya.
Yeah.
Number 3 was Mr. Donut.
I don't know how a donut restaurant is a family restaurant, but okay.
Well,
yeah.
they do serve like noodles and stuff. Like,
I must have missed
what's it
that,
called?
but yeah.
Yumcha or something. So
Really?
they do have some food. Number 4 was sushi,
Yeah.
conveyor belt sushi. Number 5 was gusto. Now we get interesting because 6 and 7 is where my list would start. So Mos Burger and Koko Ichibanya, the curry restaurant, that's where the vegan vegetarian would put at the top of their list.
I want to ask about that as well because I mean, Mos Burger I know, and I know that they're starting to offer, soy meat burgers and stuff only in select restaurants. So I haven't found the one near me, but I've got a friend, Mime, who's got a great YouTube channel. She's also from New Zealand. She doesn't, I think, post as much as she used to, but she engaged with me on this, and she said that those two restaurants were great because they have not only put out vegetarian options, but they're not like gimmicks either. They're actually they seem to be staying there, and she's very happy that it's increased her options.
Yeah, for sure.
Plus, with the Koko Ichibanya, what are the options?
Can I just mention about Mos Burger first?
Sure.
In terms of sustainability, and a lot of people don't know this, Mos Burger is very transparent. So when you go to the front of Mos Burger, they always have a chalkboard which shows you where they source their vegetables every day. And they update that every day. So our onions come from Kumamoto today. Our lettuce is from Fukuoka. Most of it is quite near where the restaurant is. But I can't think of any other fast food that does this. So they're quite sustainable in that way by supporting local farmers, whereas other fast food chains, it might all be imported from somewhere. Like I've heard people who work from those chains, all imported boxes from China, boxes from the States. So Mos Burger is really committed to local farmers. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Another thing, they use very little, they use a lot of reusable things if you eat in. So you have a basket, which is reused. You have cups and plates and forks, which is reused. So in terms of sustainability, I think they're pretty up there.
I never thought of those things, but now that you say them, yeah, that's right. It's all just paper and the basket and cutlery, and that's a good point. I think of Mos Burger. Mos Burger, of course, promotes itself in a way they deliberately. I've heard their boss actually said this once. Their founder said they deliberately sell a smaller burger at a higher price to sort of enhance the sense of premium, but they sort of follow through on that with the ingredients and so on are kind of justifying you're not going to get a frozen, constituted defrosted frozen vegetables and meat from wherever. We're going to give you a burger that tastes very good, and they do. And they've always focused on that as a chain. Not really, you don't really think of any of these family restaurants, or especially a burger chain, as doing anything around sustainability. It's cool that I could take my vegetarian friends there, But yeah, it's also, I mean, just for me as well. One thing about living in Japan is that, yeah, it's kind of funny. If you want to be a quasi, I'm never going to be. I personally, I respect vegetarians, but I'm just uh, not. I'm not going to get there. But I'm very happy to go out and eat with my vegetarian friends and have great food with them. But I also like the fact that I suppose this improves the choices a lot for people who want to come to Japan and they're worried, that they're not going to have affordable options to eat. And the other thing that's really cool about this one, about what they're doing, is, yeah, I was talking about this with May, and she was worried as well. This was just going to be a one-off. Japan is great at doing these limited edition everythings that will come out for 4 weeks and you'll love it, and then they'll take it away forever. But this is kind of sticking around, and I don't know if that's to do with the Olympics getting postponed or if it was planned for the Olympics or something.
Yeah, well, we did a big cycling trip the other day, and so we're starving in
Yeah,
Onomichi in Hiroshima. And my
yeah,
son and I said, should we see if they have the plant burger?
yeah,
Because most burger has a vegan burger right now,
right,
but only at certain locations.
right.
And so we went to the local shop, and they're like, no, we don't have it here, so sorry. But they were so nice. And then the manager wrote
Mm.
down the locations in Hiroshima which do have it,
Oh, nice.
and gave us the list so that we
Yeah,
would know for next time. But they also have a soy meat burger.
yeah.
So the bun is not going to be vegan, but
Mm.
you can get a lot of their burgers wrapped in lettuce instead of bread.
Okay.
So that's good for gluten free as well, right?
And
So,
that's what Rochelle Kopp was talking about as well, how she's
right.
seeing slightly more gluten-free, still very difficult, but yeah.
So it's really hard to eat, but it's basically like a head of lettuce with a
Yeah.
burger inside.
It sounds a bit like Korean, like bulgogi. That's how
Yeah,
you
I
wrap
think
in lettuce, isn't it?
maybe that's the idea behind it. But then
Yeah.
so there is a vegetarian vegan option even if they don't have the plant-based burger
Hmm.
at that location. So I was very impressed by the staff and how they're able to think laterally in that way and give us the added value service by telling us which ones they did. I mean, we were doing it in Japanese,
Yeah.
but I think the seed is there. They're starting to really think about it.
And the other thing I think where this is interesting to see where it goes in places like New Zealand, and United States and Europe and so on, ethical vegetarianism is a big and growing sort of a thing, as well as people doing it for health or whatever, or choosing to eliminate those sorts of foods. And while I can't see Japan, it's still a bit of a ways away from the idea of excluding foods from diet and so on. What Japanese do is they will. It's one thing I remember. I was baffled when I first got to Japan, and like you go to a vending machine during summer, and sometimes like the sports drinks will have like these enormous 500 ml cans and 300 ml cans at the same price. And of course, I went and bought the big can, and all my friends bought the smaller can. And I asked them, "Why did you buy the smaller can?" And they said, "Well, I only need the smaller can. I don't feel like drinking too much." But I'm from a culture where, you're missing out you're free to, even if you throw it away, you're better off getting more stuff, right? The consumerist sort of thing. And it's funny, Japanese will go out. I'll go out with my Japanese friends. No one will have any restrictions, but we'll perfectly happily have a meal that's mostly vegetables. And sometimes I myself, like if I've had a, heavy lunch or whatever, I go out for dinner, I might think, you know what, today I'm gonna have the veggie burger just because it sounds lighter, it sounds healthier, and I had a big lunch or whatever. And people might choose it from that. So I still think putting the options there, I could see it catching on. And
Yeah.
overall, although the ethical thing is still probably a ways off, I must admit I am increasingly convinced by the footprint, the carbon and the energy, and the amount of intensity of land use for animal production. It's absolutely not sustainable. I know. I'm wondering how many more generations we're even going to have meat. So, from that perspective as well, having good options now and to sort of soften that transition for people who are not already into it, like for me as well, I can totally buy into that.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a new player in town, which is just a couple weeks old,
Mm.
Detour Coffee Shop, which has
Yeah.
just launched a vegan burger at the
Oh,
coffee
really?
shop chain. Yeah,
Oh.
so that's also very interesting. But the whole idea of replacing meat, especially the fast food meat, the low
Mm.
quality meats,
Mm.
with a soy option or Beyond Burger type, very similar consistency, which has a much less carbon footprint, it makes a lot of sense. you know?
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Sorry, this might come across as a weird question from non-vegetarian to a
No,
vegetarian.
go ahead.
Like, so personally, when I took my wife to the UK and we were traveling around in rural UK, and she just in London there's good food, but honestly the UK, my culture and heritage, it's not great food, you know, especially after midday. And when we were going out to like these old-fashioned English pubs, and you know, it was all overboiled vegetables and gravy and and something, and my wife was at a pub and she saw there was a vegetarian dinner option. And she's like, well, I can't stand all this heavy fatty stuff, so I'm just going to have the vegetarian meal. And but what came out was all this kind of constituted, kind of like horrible it was imitation sausages. The vegetarian meal had no vegetables in it. It was all imitation meats. And I thought it was hilarious because I knew that what my wife wanted was just some fresh vegetables or something, like some meringue and some, you know, broccoli or whatever. But what came out was this rubbery sort of fake meat. And I thought, I after this, I talked about this with my friends, like, isn't it weird that that English people are so far from vegetarianism that they would assume what vegetarians crave, you know, that they're missing out on all this meat and we must give them meat so that they feel included. But then when I thought that was strange, that there's all this emphasis on making this imitation meat, like, shouldn't they just be making good vegetables? I had a lot of vegetarian people tell me on Twitter and so on, no, I miss meat. I want meat. I just don't want the guilt of meat. So
it's interesting because a lot of people have shifted. Like Nadia McKechnie was talking about being an animal rights activist. So she's a vegan because she really identifies with the cruelty that the animal, and that's definitely a part of it. But so many people in recent years have been shifting their diet because of the footprint, because of the carbon impact. And so if they're doing it for that reason, of course, you're more likely to miss the meat taste, right?
Right. This is it. Do vegetarians, are they just toughing it out and missing meat the whole time and craving something?
Well, they're not one kind, right? Like vegetarians is a diverse group. Vegans is a diverse group. Like for myself, I'm much more driven by sustainability, right? So if I have a chance to buy like a secondhand leather jacket in a shop versus a plastic leather brand new thing, I'm gonna go for the secondhand leather because I'm thinking more about the reuse and the sustainability of it than the strictly vegan. I also support honeybee farmers in Japan, and I will buy their honey and use it, you know, but there's vegans who will never have honey. So it is case by case, and there is a lot of diversity within the group.
And appreciate it. And I think from that perspective, this is where in Japan, what's changed me coming from a country like New Zealand, coming to Japan, where the idea of having a meal where you have tofu first and then you have some grilled vegetables after that, and that's the whole meal. I couldn't even fathom that as a meal, like before I came to Japan, whereas now I can enjoy that. But granted, when you have that in Japan, it's never going to be vegan, even if you don't see meat. There's always going to be, with the dashi and everything else, there's always going to be little things there's always going to be compromises there. But as someone who's not coming from a perspective of being strictly married to that, to me, it's much more imaginable, having lived in Japan for a long time, the idea of, I'm much more open to the idea, you can have a great dinner at a good restaurant, even an expensive restaurant, and a really great meal that doesn't necessarily have meat in it. I'm cool with that, not even, you know, as someone who's necessarily aiming for that. And that's, I find I appreciate vegetables a lot better. Just all the food in Japan is so good. I mean, I'm from a country that's good at producing food, but Japan is just so next level.
It's so beautiful. And with my work in tourism and consulting and going on trips for content and stuff, you get served the most amazing meals. And you know, it's not just typical Kyoto Buddhist food. It's a lot of creativity and innovation in terms of giving out, you know, local organic vegetables in a beautiful way. So I think there's so much potential for Japan to really show how great it can be for vegetarian, vegan, I think.
It says something about the cultures that, and I get it, there's all this excitement in America about these super realistic meats being produced in labs. Whereas in Japan, I'm much more open to the idea. I would actually be more open to the idea of just having a great tofu and veggie meal than having a kind of a quasi, having a weird lab meat.
Yeah.
This is where Japan has really changed me on that. But overall, I definitely, if I was told we need to consume less meat or whatever, if it became like a real imperative, I think I could live with that better here. I don't know. I could go cold turkey on it or ethically cold turkey. I'm just I'm too old to change. But the idea of recognizing the economic the environmental harm and the benefits of switching over, and that you can do it so well. This is what it teaches me: is that you're not missing. You don't have to feel like you're missing out.
Yeah.
So
Well, let's shift gears a little bit.
yes,
Let's go to the gender issue news that we've had. You found a really interesting article about 1 in 4 women are over 70 in Japan.
that's right. And I think the number was over the retirement age of 65. Both genders was something like
3.6 million.
yeah.
It looks like.
It was closer to a third even. So what I found interesting about that, apart from the gender thing, of course, there are more women who live longer. Congratulations. Um, but there's also just the general. I find it a fascinating issue. This Monday, of course, was Respect for the Aged Day that we have every year. Uh, it is still. I don't know about you, but I've been here 22 years and I still can't remember all the holidays. So every holiday still feels like a bonus.
Yeah.
I
I
realize
have
that
to
about
look at
it.
the calendar and then I'm like, oh, it's
Oh,
autumn
look at that.
equinox.
Yeah, wonderful. But
Respect
yeah,
for the Age Day. Yeah, it's a fantastic holiday to
great
have.
idea for a holiday, and
Yeah.
it's a it's a good prompt to think about things. And it's a day when all this news talked about how whoa demographic bubbles and so on. And it used to be that the retirement age was based on the average life expectancy, so it was genuinely a bonus. It was only half. The average person wouldn't get any retirement in the old days, whereas now most people, like in Japan, are getting on average 15 to 20 years retirement time.
Yeah.
And I find the whole issue partly a gender thing, because it is more women than men, but at the same time, yeah, there's a huge part of the population that is kind of, economically, companies forcing them into retirement or whatever when they're still productive.
Yeah.
And also, how long is the retirement system going to sustain with people living longer and so on. So to me, it's a really interesting problem about how the whole economy, when all the ways you think about the economy needs to be rewired around sustainability, that aspect of what percentage of the population is also retired and how can they contribute and change. I mean, you don't need to be working in a coal mine necessarily, especially nowadays in a digital economy. Granted, the training aspects may be challenging for some people, but it's not like it's physical labor. People can be doing things
Mm-hmm.
and also
Yeah.
working in so many different ways. So I think it raises really interesting questions about participation of women, participation of elderly, as well as how should they be participating? What can they be doing if we talk about shifting the whole way that the economy works as it needs to for climate change? Japan's got this massive population of elderly people. How could we be both? This sounds horrible, but how can we be using them, in a way that's actually not just helping themselves, helping them and helping the economy, but is also helping the economy move in, a better direction. There's actually, I think, a huge opportunity with that labor
Mm-hmm.
pool that's not tapped, right? And it's
Yeah.
really interesting when you consider.
But, certain things have to change. So, better work-life balance needs to come into play. Working from home during coronavirus, this is a huge benefit for older people who work in businesses, as well as younger people, as well as parents. There's a lot of great things that have happened because of stay at home and reassessing how you can give people value from work by the output, not just the hours, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important moving forward. I love to link this to another article from your Flipboard about the 81-year-old who learned coding.
Yeah.
So showing that you have productivity later in life as well with longer age span.
Well, one thing to me, apart from obviously, that's a wonderful story. And I don't doubt that there are many, many more people who could do that if challenged. But I also don't doubt it's a challenge, and one, it might be a challenge, and two, it might not be it might not be of interest to a lot of elderly people to necessarily become coders, although I think that's a great story. But I work in IT, and I have for most of my working career. And right now, you talk about the big shifts in the economy, the things that are enabling these amazing technological jumps. All the jumps in technology that are happening around sustainable technology, renewable technology, all that. It's all coming from this increase in artificial intelligence. And what people misunderstand about artificial intelligence is that there's a massive, really basic human labor component involved in train an AI model. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the TV show Silicon Valley, but have you seen it?
Yeah.
There's the app Hot Dog or Not a Hot Dog.
Oh, I don't know if I know that one. Yeah.
One of the roommates has an app that he sells for $1 million, and all it does is it's supposed to identify any type of food, like based on the camera, but all it identifies is whether something is a hot dog or not.
Oh, funny.
But that's literally how AI works, and the way that you train it to recognize whether something is a hot dog or not is you have to have a lot of people spending a lot of time looking at photos of random things and teaching the machine whether it's a hot dog or not until the machine has enough data to recognize the pattern.
Kind of data that's inputted in the code is really necessary for the output from the new AI, right? There was news just the other day about a new face scanner that can identify faces even with masks on. Did you see that
NEC. One? I saw that. But the point, so the point is, the way that it works is, so you don't code that a face looks like this or a hot dog looks like this. What you do is you code an algorithm, basically like a pattern, which will figure out how to go through data, and then you just have to dump a lot of data and sort of and you'll have humans inputting first, yes, no, and it will become smarter and smarter the more data is in there. And it can learn on itself, but first of all, it's got to have like a pool of all of this data, of all this reference data. And this is how you train for things like facial recognition. The reason that there's bias issues and so on and all of this technology is because it's being done only by people who only recognizes white faces better because it's often being trained by white people. And again, the way to correct all of these things is get more diversity. Employ people in Africa, employ people in Asia. But not only that, in the end of the day, that work for training AI models that are all being fed into these supercomputers right now, all of the training for that, it's not technical, it's not complex. It's mostly being done in sort of by gig economy people, but university students and so on. But surely you could go to elderly homes, and if they wanted to supplement their pensions, you could pay them some pocket money that they'd have to go and just say if something's recognized, if things are hot dogs or not. It's economically extremely valuable. There's all sorts of ways that we could have elderly participating even in the tech economy, and it's actually easier now than it ever was. So I don't know. I think while we have all of these challenges of old companies and old ways of working changing, at the same time, with the new ways of working and the new types of jobs out there, people are sort of assuming by default that elderly can't do new jobs or tech jobs or anything like that, but they totally can.
Yeah.
And just thinking about that this week, and in a country like Japan that has the problem the most, and also has a huge problem because there's a problem with training AIs for Japan, because often, like for reading Japanese AI or reading road sign AI or something like that, you need people who speak Japanese, and so they can't build up data sets as easily as in America or in Europe or India, for example, where you have a lot of English speakers. So they need to find people, and there aren't enough students or young people to do the work. I'm like, you're talking on this article over here that a third of the population is retired, and the government has to figure out, how to pay their pensions and keep them happy and occupied. And over here we have this problem that we've got all this work that needs to be done and not enough people to do it. That's really valuable, and they don't know what to do. So
in terms of social equity and value, quality of life, I think that it's a very complicated issue because I think we need to get away from this idea that old retired people are doing everything for free. They're going to need some kind of funding for doing quality work. The same thing we should be saying for students who are interning, working hard. They should get compensated as well. And people working for NPOs, NGOs, charities, you have to have some value for what they do. I think there is a danger in Japan and maybe elsewhere that a lot of certain work by certain people should be done for free. And I think that mindset needs to change a little bit if we're going to access the free time of retired folk, because they're not going to want to do everything for free, right?
Absolutely. And I don't think the assumption, and what I'm frustrated thinking of, is certainly not making them do work for free. It's valuable, they're getting paid. I guess the danger of what I'm thinking is, so the challenge right now is that Japan, and like most economies, but again, somehow Japan in a more extreme way has had the structured seniority-based economy for so long, where young people should not expect to, they should barely be able to live by themselves. And over time, people get more money. And then there's this problem. Half the reason that you have this retirement age now, it's not capability, it's that they can't afford. The wage of a 65-year-old person can be the same as 3 25-year-old people, and the companies, want to change that. So to me, it's the other problem that, in a way, it's great to allow people to continue working, but it's very disruptive, obviously, when it involves a balancing of incomes.
Plus, it's all, the salaries are linked to age a lot of the time still, and seniority. And so that senpai kohai thing is so strong in Japan. That becomes tricky if the retirement age is moved, of course.
But at the same time, I mean, I'm not expecting to be able to live on a pension. So I'm thinking myself now, and I'm not sure that the type of job that I have right now it's great, but I don't know if I'll be able to do it till I'm 80 anyway. So I must admit, it's kind of a challenge now for all of us to also think, while I'm enjoying my job, it's not just wanting to do an interesting side gig or anything like that. I must admit, I'm sort of thinking myself all the time, how am I going to look after myself? I'm not going to expect to be, it'd be great if I can get anything from the government, but I'm not expecting it.
Yeah, I think most of us in our mid-career to late career, that's the logic we have to start thinking about realistically, right? Let me just put in some comments. Allison says, I think she's talking about you. You've got a great radio podcast voice.
I've heard I've got a good voice for helping people get to sleep on Sunday nights, which I provide that as a service.
And John Walsh says, is it still summer where you are? I think you're talking to me, because it's hot. It is hot today, yeah.
It's not quite over. It's in the summer is in its last throes, isn't it?
The morning and evening is cool, but the middle of the day, well, even now it's still quite warm. But I don't have to use my air conditioning anymore, so for me it's a win.
Last night was the first night, among the many guilty. Here I am talking about sustainability, and at the same time, I just turned off my my aircon, I think, for the first time in 3 months last night. So yeah, I'm definitely not walking the talk as well as I should. But it's nice hitting that time of year when you don't have either the aircon or the heater on.
Sometimes you just gotta use it. It's too hot. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about government. Shinjiro Koizumi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Making the environment sexy.
Yeah, that's right. That was his catchphrase, wasn't it? Was it?
It's the only noticeable policy he's had as Minister of Environment, and I'm not sure that much came of it. I must admit, what I thought that we were going to, when we were talking about doing this, it occurred to me, I think one of the things we said was talk about what the new government's going to be like for the environment.
Yeah.
And I realized, it's got the same environment minister as before, so it's going to be the same carryover. So now that you mentioned that, what has he been doing? Because I haven't really noticed very much except for that one statement.
Yeah.
And I searched and I searched and I searched, and honestly, I couldn't find very much. And what I could find, it was about 60% really not good.
Yeah, I mean, he stands out in my memory from the UN delegation in Davos. Was it last year? Was it this year? Last year? I can't keep track.
It was recently. Yeah, I think maybe early this year. Yeah.
And he was very enthusiastic, and everybody had high hopes. And then in an interview after, he said, "No, Japan is very committed to coal for the next 20 years." or
Yeah, the
something, you
fact he
know?
actually said that out loud. I mean, it's one thing to think it, and you could almost even forgive. I mean, but he's the environment. I mean, if he was in the Ministry for Economy, Trade, and Industry, which does look after renewable energy, and I could be sympathetic in a back room to bureaucrats talking about how difficult it is to give everyone enough electricity with all the nuclear plants shut down, and I could be sympathetic to that. But when the Minister of the Environment says publicly that it's our policy to support coal, I mean, that's pretty much the patients are running the asylum. Um,
Yeah,
and
that's
yeah, yeah,
it's pretty near, it's pretty short-sighted, right? And if you're environment minister, you would
yeah,
hope that you
a
would
little
be
bit
a
of idealism.
little bit more long-term future environment solution type of person.
It's baffling. I mean,
Yes.
look, and the thing is, I worked in renewable energy for years. I worked in renewable energy policy, working with the Ministry of Economy and the Ministry of Environment. And what always reassures me about Japan and these policies is that government policy in Japan is not really subject to the whims of political, popularity. There are thousands of people dedicated on the subject matter with lifetime tenure who are just dedicated to finding the best policies and sort of doing them. It makes it very hard to change direction, but generally it means you don't have outlandish, impractical things or fads or radical shifts or anything like that. And the time that I was involved in this, while even when there wasn't a lot being said in public, I knew that there was an awful lot going on in the background. Like since the Kyoto Protocol, there was a deep commitment to decarbonization, and renewable energy is part of decarbonization. But also this is also why they were building dams, and it's also why they were planning to add nuclear plants. But the idea of climate change being an emergency, and a big arm of that came up in the early 2000s was this huge commitment to renewable energy and so on. And it just seems like the combination of some world sort of leading countries losing their willpower to continue trying to fight climate change and the nuclear accidents, that was like two really big foundations of the energy policy of Japan, which albeit, it is expensive and it's a huge commitment to change that. But I don't know whether the loss of commitment, I do get the feeling for someone like Koizumi, who I think is the youngest member in the cabinet, um, he's no doubt doing what he's being advised to do by his vice ministers and so on. But somewhere along the line, I don't know how the switch happened, because when I was involved, it was a really deep commitment to changing that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, in light of another article that you sent
Mm.
about the clean tech,
Yep.
clean tech industry is
VCs.
just booming. Yeah, VC.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also about Tesla shocking everybody at the
Yeah.
battery talk, and saying, how they're going to move away from cobalt. And they're going to really rival Panasonic, which everybody was thinking they were going to partner with Panasonic or really collaborate with.
I don't know what's going on. And I've read the stories today about how Panasonic is shocked that Tesla's figured out a better way to make batteries than them and maybe going on their own, although they can't for a while. I mean, the capacity that they're talking about is years out. And how Toyota and the Japanese car manufacturers are also shocked same day in a separate announcement by California of having no internal combustion cars by 2035, which contradicts, I think the Japanese manufacturers like Toyota and Honda have gone for hybrid cars, so they haven't gone for all electric. Whereas California sort of has declared, if you want to sell cars in that state, even hybrid or those sort of other technologies are not I mean, in a way, I'm a little bit sympathetic to Toyota on this as well. Toyota has hydrogen cars, that fuel cell, there's a bunch of different technologies that you could get to zero emissions, but they've been really prescriptive in California that no combustion.
Yeah.
So
well,
they're kind of
I went to
good for
my
Tesla.
I went to my Honda dealer the other day, and I have a Tesla.
Yeah.
I was looking for a Japanese electronic vehicle to buy, and Tesla is in Japan, and they had the Model 3, so I put my order in because it was an EV that I could afford, so a few years ago. And I've been very happy with it. But I was a Honda person for years.
Great
I
cars.
love my Honda dealership. They're such nice people. And for years, I was pressuring him to get their EV out. And he's like, we're not going to do an EV. We're going to do hydrogen. And then they did come out with an EV recently. But I really think Toyota was kind of pressuring the whole Japanese car industry not to go for the EV side, to go and support the hydrogen route, because that was Toyota's vision.
I wonder. I mean, Honda and Toyota are, of course, such big rivals. So they could have had competing visions, but of course it is
They do collaborate, a lot. I think Toyota's the leader. I don't know, maybe you've heard some things behind the scenes, but that was the impression I got from the dealership guy.
One thing I read a fascinating article in Nikkei, in the Japanese business newspaper, a couple of probably 3 months ago now, where I don't even know how this ended up as a news story, but apparently, or even how this is legal, but apparently there was some story that there was some invitation with press present where some engineers from Honda and Toyota and the leading Japanese car manufacturers literally took apart a Tesla to see how it was made. And it was giving their impressions. And what they were apparently, and they quoted the Toyota engineers that are dumbfounded by the simplicity. A big thing that Tesla makes a big deal about is how there are so few components and how they've gone into this really radically simplified manufacturing process to lower the cost, to make the cars affordable. And this was the Nikkei was saying that the Japanese car manufacturer engineering experts were looking at this Tesla when they realized that they weren't using, that the Japanese car manufacturers, part of the way that they're built up is they're so invested in these deep, huge, diverse supply chains, hundreds of small companies, even little factories sometimes, little mom and pop factories that do nothing but supply brake pads, for a certain model of Honda or whatever. And so they can't pivot. This is the point. They're so committed to, the parts in that engine, that are probably supplied by 100 different companies that probably have 2 or 3 year supply contracts. So even if they wanted to suddenly, if they needed to simplify their manufacturing process to compete with Tesla, they just can't. They're locked in to the way of doing things that they're in, and they can't move that fast. And I think Tesla knows that. That's where they're going for everybody.
I mean, I've heard that argument a lot about how Tesla has overtaken the market and really become a leader, and how it was probably easier as a new company that only did electric cars than a company that had so much baggage and so much supply chain collaborations kind of on their system. I mean, I'm in Hiroshima. We're the home of Mazda, right? Yeah. And I tried for years to get a Mazda, but it just... They don't do EVs. They're not even doing hybrids, you know? So what's going on?
Mazda was going to do hydrogen rotary. The one thing that the rotary is good at, they're not very fuel efficient, although they're wonderful engines, but they actually work really well with hydrogen. But hydrogen, there's no infrastructure, and that's a huge challenge. And they had concepts like that. I'm a Mazda fan. I grew up with Mazdas.
Me too. In Hawaii, Mazda is super, super popular. Everybody has a open back truck. Mazda open back truck was really popular when I was growing up.
Yeah. It wasn't easy, and it still isn't easy. What Tesla's doing is it's so capital intensive to set up the factories and to get up to the scale that you need for it to make sense. And they're still rushing for that. And what I find fascinating about Tesla, just as a technology geek who's interested in this, is there are so many short sellers on Tesla as well, and and there's a legitimate there have been quality issues, all the rushing to get up to the right scale. It's been a race, and it's without precedent. It's not like anybody could have done this. You need deep pockets to to set up all of these sort of factories and to set them up from scratch in a way that's completely different to how other cars have been manufactured. But watching the way that they're like those internet companies from the late 1990s, where they were just rushing to get up to a scale, in a certain amount of time, and they're doing it with hardware and engineering, which is to me, I mean, I'm rooting for them. I don't like the idea of us being wedded to one solution. I would love to have a choice between a hydrogen car. And there was another article I think I shared, which was just interesting, that Airbus has figured out how to make hydrogen-powered planes, which would be zero emissions, and it gets around. And of course, you can't put electric engines onto planes that can go very far. So I think it'd be great if we have a bunch of technologies that get us there and a bunch of choices, but certainly they're going all in on the batteries. And the thing about batteries that I never liked is that they're dirty to make, they're dirty to dispose of, and they have a limited life that degrades over time. And there really haven't been a lot of really significant improvements in battery tech over the last long time. And really, Panasonic was one of the few companies to make any sort of strides. And this is in an industry where 2 or 3 or 4% improvement in storage is a huge leap. So Battery Day, I watched all the stuff for that, and if that's all legit, that's some crazy stuff,
That's really impressive. But
yeah.
back to the batteries in Japan,
Yeah.
I came across, and I couldn't find it again today, but Japanese companies are going all in with battery technology. Did you read that one? I
I
think
didn't
that
see
was
that,
just
but makes sense.
yesterday. I
Okay.
need to find it again. But they're one step behind
Mm.
what Elon Musk and his team at Tesla
Everyone
have
is
been
behind that,
trying to
but
do, right? So,
but Panasonic basically has, until
but they
Battery
have
Day yesterday, been the world leading battery company, and their business has
definitely.
been struggling, so it makes sense they'd be doubling down on that. But look, when we were talking the other day about the challenges of renewables in a country that has this really fragmented power grid or whatever, and the idea of variability and how to store, intermittent like generation sources, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
But you need such massive volumes of batteries, and then you've got to figure out how to keep those going. But it's a great solution for Japan
Yeah.
and the problems that Japan has for things like power generation and for typhoons and power outages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Having a big battery on a house or having a
Well,
car as a battery.
people often ask me, can you use your car as a home battery? But you can't do that
It's
with a
heading that
Tesla.
way, I hear. Yeah.
But you can get, what is it, the power wall that
Yeah.
is a really decent quality home battery. And when I was researching Powerwall versus Panasonic's
Mm.
home version,
Yeah.
the price is just insanely different.
Yeah.
Like half the power storage,
Mm.
3 times as much the cost,
Oh.
comparing Panasonic and Tesla. I mean, that was a few years ago.
Yeah.
But it'll be really interesting to see that now Japanese companies are going all in but going for it with developing battery technology.
Yeah. In fact, there was something. Oh, it's not on the list that I sent, but there was a news story like a week ago that was talking about some part of the country. It might have been in West Japan. One of the prefectures was for the first time permitting micro-generated power to be fed back into the grid. And you know what? If that expands, then batteries make total sense, because that means you can actually save it in the battery in the peak hours if you want to make some money back, and you're in a place that what you're getting off your roof or what you're getting from your car or whatever.
Yeah.
That
And
really opens that up.
even for neighborhoods that lack a decent grid, that's a really exciting new technology. We've got 8 more minutes, so
8 more minutes.
I wanna do the top 100 most influential people and how there are only 2 Japanese, and the stories are very interesting.
Yeah, both I suppose different, although kind of similarities, but no, indeed, Naomi Osaka and Shiori Ito,
That's
right?
right.
Shiori Ito's I think actually, because everyone knows about Naomi Osaka, she's one of the most famous women in the world right now, and one of the highest, I think, earning women in sports as well. I mean, she's and good for her in so many ways. I've talked on my own vlog so many times about how much, in all the different ways, I'm such a fan of her.
She's a real hero for me too, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of women and people of color and young Japanese. I think she has a huge, diverse fan base. It's wonderful.
Well, it's wonderful that she demonstrates to Japanese people again that there are more and more Japanese people that don't look like that aren't from backgrounds that people would have traditionally considered Japanese, but also wonderful to see of course there's always going to be some trolls and some morons, but generally speaking, there's this huge, like, now there've been multiple generations of people like us living in Japan. There's far the general acceptance, I think, of greater diversity of what's Japanese is coming, and she's helping to pull that along, but also for Haiti as well. I mean, I kind of wish in a way that she was almost representing Haiti, in the sense that for the kids in that country that really do need people to look up to and things to aspire to as well. She's doing so much for so many people, but as a woman, as someone from 3 backgrounds, and wonderful.
Yeah.
And what she's doing around BLM.
Her most recent news, if anybody has missed it, in 7 of her matches, she wore 7 different masks with 7 different names of people that were killed by police and have become iconic in the Black Lives Matter movement. And she was given a lot of flack, actually, from companies, including her sponsors. But then a lot of people did rally support for her. as well, saying that she is living that reality. She's not talking about somebody else's issue. This is her personal issue. And the way that she was bringing attention to it, and by wearing the mask, it made the Japanese news commentators tell the story of the people's names, right?
I mean, I think the news story was that, again, who knows what went on in the background, and I'm sure in more discreet circles there might have been a lot more pushback from sponsors, and everyone suspects that. There was, I think, one news story that said that one unnamed sponsor didn't like it, and she has a lot of sponsors, so I hope it's not as bad, as that. But certainly it did show there's huge coverage and huge deep dives on these are what these names mean, and this is what it's about in Japan. So that was great for that. The other thing I just love about her is, for someone who seems kind of still very young and comes across kind of awkward and cute, that interview after she won the US Open, and
that was incredible, wasn't it?
What were you thinking when you were putting that on? Like, what do you want to say? And she's like, well, what do you think?
Yeah. More importantly, what do you think when you realize that, when you read that, that's
the point. I
so
love
important to say.
By contrast, Shiori Ito, in a way, more important in a lot of ways, and in a way not as. When you say people who are influential, I kind of honestly, I think it's great that they held her up. She should be more influential. She should be one of the most 100 influential people in the world. I would argue that she was not, and that's the problem, and that's why it's good that they listed her, because she should be and she wasn't.
Definitely. And I thought the same thing, and I thought, well, maybe this being in Time magazine from the outside, getting some respect from the outside might help her get more coverage and more respect inside Japan.
I mean, the way, so, and that he's really close to a government official who's really close to the press, really close to the Abe administration, and who almost certainly, obviously, raped her. And you could sort of see the whole machine. It is funny in Japan how you can see whenever there's news stories or scandals, there's a degree where it feels manufactured, because it sort of is being managed. And the way that the news cycle sort of pivoted on the story about her, it was unavoidable. You couldn't keep it out of the news, but everyone was very awkward about how to do it. And what I noticed, call me paranoid, but I remember that there was, they talked about her being the Me Too movement coming to Japan. And then all of a sudden, this bigger news story started about a woman who was complaining about being forced to wear high heels, and she wanted to do the kutsu movement. And all of a sudden that became the hashtag, and Dentsu and all the news cycles pivoted to talking about shoes.
Yeah.
And we never heard her name again. And I kind of thought, not saying that isn't also perhaps a legitimate issue brought up sincerely by the person who raised it, but it felt like the news cycle found a way to escape from confronting the much more important and difficult issue of abuse, right?
Yeah, and really interesting around that same time, which I run in parallel to the Black Lives Matter movement, which Naomi Osaka has become such a spokesperson for. Shiori Ito is credited with bringing Me Too to Japan. But what I noticed a lot in the coverage was that people were holding up signs, men and women together, who did not have any personal stories of rape or abuse or harassment, holding up signs of We Too. Now, this really, now on reflection, this really reminds me of the All Lives Matter argument, right? And it diluted the whole Me Too movement power in Japan. And I found it really bad taste, to put it lightly. And I think she definitely should have gotten more discussion about her issue. So
I think I know the one that you're talking about. I think I saw there were opposition lawmakers, elderly opposition lawmakers in a group that were honestly, I think, with good intentions, wanting to show support. But
having a
group of elderly men who kind of seemed to not quite get the point and were holding up the Me Too signs. I get it. Solidarity is great, but the whole message just never quite landed here, actually. And it's a message that obviously needs to land. I mean,
really interesting how she lost the criminal case, but she won the civil case.
Did she lose, or did they just not prosecute?
I
think they didn't prosecute.
Well, she didn't win for whatever reason, right?
they didn't take, I think the prosecutors thought there wasn't enough stuff for a case. And so even though she wanted to prosecute, the prosecutors declined to prosecute because they felt there wasn't enough evidence. And she went through, and this was after they put her through the whole, kind of almost to discourage. I mean, again, the small percentage of cases like this that get prosecuted in Japan, and that what they put you through, that the testing your story, the interrogations, the medical stuff. And she went through all of it because she was so determined to prosecute. And at the end of it, the prosecutors decided, no, we don't want to prosecute this. And so then she did the civil case herself, which she won.
So
But exactly illustrative of the problem, actually.
But there's so much frustration in both of their stories. And I think there's so much power in both of their stories as Japanese women, moving the line forward just a little bit, just to help those coming behind. So I was really happy to see, of course, these two stories featured in Time as the 100 most influential people around the world, and the only two Japanese people in the list. So really powerful.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
So we have reached the hour mark.
We could do this forever.
Yeah, we could do this forever. This is so fun. Of the topics that we talked about today, is there any one that you thought this shows good, like, momentum for moving sustainability forward? I think the last topic we talked about, I think in terms of gender empowerment, those are good stories that I would say is very sustainable.
Yeah, actually, and we won't talk about it today. What I actually think is really exciting, that I think I had as like the fifth on the list of things that we should talk about. The government right now is basically a geek and someone who wants to live in a cyberpunk sort of future, where everything outside is environmentally nice and everything. I think the government talking about the doubling down on digitization right now, the huge push that's happening on that actually has potentially so much upside and benefit that's a whole easily another hour discussion to go into that. So we didn't even really touch on that, but I think there is a lot of optimism for Japan right now for me. There's a lot of work to be done in a lot of areas, and a lot of areas nothing's happening, but an area where things are happening that I think is actually going to be really great long term, and it ties in with the change of the working style and coronavirus, but it's the way that the government is still so paper-based and human-based. To do a form, you have to get on a train, get in a car, 3 people have to go into an office, they all have to stamp a form that's made from paper chopped down from trees chopped down in Indonesia. There's so much opportunity for inclusiveness, for efficiency, for access, for equalization.
Yeah.
And the government's finally doing that. It's taken a long time. So we didn't even talk about that. For sustainability, though, I'm super excited about that. I'm also excited about more vegetarian choices.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. So I think it comes down to, like you're saying, diversity of food choices, inclusion of people who are retired age in the workforce, diversity and inclusion, reusing, recycling, biodegradable. I think we touched on a lot of these great sustainability topics today.
For another day, we should talk recycling as well. There are some, I've always had a thing, it never quite felt right, the emphasis on if you're putting it in the recycle bin, you're doing a good job, and it's not. It's a crutch, right? Yeah. And people don't talk about reuse and extending life of products.
I have lots of exciting ideas about reuse and getting away from recycling and doing more reuse containers. So I have ideas for how we can redesign our vending machines in Japan and everything. So next time.
Certainly.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. Thank you everybody for joining. Aaron looked like he was a bit bored. We got some Z's from Aaron. Sorry, Aaron Carter. Please tune in next time. We'll try to be more exciting for you.
We'll include environmentally friendly explosions next time.
Thank you, everybody, for joining, and have a great weekend. And we'll see you again next week. Take care.